Last month, we went over all of TF2's worst maps, brought to you by the largest TF2 map survey to ever exist. Today, we're going over all of TF2's best maps, the ones that were able to crack into the higher tiers. Same rules as last time. This ranking only applies to maps that are already in the base rotation. Nothing from Scream Fortress, Smithsmiths, Arena Mode, or Man vs. Machine will be on the list. And of course, I personally have no input on where these maps are on the tier list beyond my one ballot submission. Nothing more to add, so let's get back into it. 52. Boardwalk. The first map to crack into the higher tiers, and I'm very happy to see this one make it. In a sea of summer update Koth map mediocrity, Boardwalk stands out as a diamond in the rough. The layout is borderline perfect, with multiple ways to approach the objective, the flanks are some of the most impactful ones in the game, and the conveyor belt Randy Savage drops from above have yet to lose their charm a year later. The carnival games in Spawn are a nice touch too. It does so many things right. 51. Freight. Nothing about a map that can't be fixed by adding a couple of trains to it. Freight takes that idea and makes it the map's central theme. And while it definitely does show its age, especially through its absurdly flat terrain around mid, it's easily one of the most charming maps in the game. The chokes are brutal and that final point push is a gauntlet and a half, but the trains breaking up team fights and letting players regroup into a giant wrecking ball while they pass by is something that never gets old. It has a few issues, but it excels in areas that very few others do. 50. Two Fort. TF2's most iconic map, the most popular map by playtime, and the one to receive the fourth highest amount of perfect 10 out of 10 rankings. So why is it so low? Well, simply put, most players tend to evolve beyond the 2 Fort starting zone after a certain amount of time. Almost every game becomes an unbreakable stalemate, so everyone just kind of fucks around and makes their own fun. Why bash your head into a sentry brick wall over and over again when you can conga around the map while tossing sandwiches? I know which one I'm picking. 49. Nightfall. You really don't see this one played that much anymore. In fact, it has the lowest submission rate of any map in the top half of this ranking. And that's a shame, because all three stages of Nightfall are really enjoyable and offer a lot of different playstyle variety. Every class is able to perform well on all three stages, and the mid-sections are always packed to the brim with huge team fights. We run this one a lot on Club Wheezy Vanilla. If you've never played a full 12v12 Nightfall game, try your luck there. 48. Gully Wash. Easily one of the most unique 5CP maps in the game. Every point has something special about it. Mid being raised off the floor gives a lot of opportunity for explosive classes to take advantage on the high ground, but it's still an open enough area to have it not become an over-centralizing strategy. The second points always have this fun standoff where cappers are eyeing down the doorways, prepping for any pushes to come. And while susceptible to backcapping, the variety of pathways funneling to last make it so that no two final push-ins are identical. Personally, I'd rank this one a bit higher. 47. Cascade. Another all-around very solid addition. Hard to imagine this one was added alongside Bread Space of all things. The underpoint standoffs for the medium medkit is something you don't get anywhere else, and I really like how the side tunnels allow for some long-range pressure above the point, but isn't so effective to the point of mandating its usage. Cascade's a bit too open in some areas. I'd probably scale this one down a little bit, but it's still pretty good. 46. Odyssey. The first payload map that's centered around the attackers having a persistent height advantage over red. It's got a lot of fun perches to fight from, well-worn flanks that can make all the difference, and a very cheesy saw blade ending courtesy of a control point cap. Not like you make it there that often though, because that second point is where games go to die. And of course the visuals are a contentious point for some, but it's got enough fans to keep it inside the B tier. 45. Powerhouse. One of the most long-running, back-and-forth control point maps in the game, largely down to it being the only 3CP map of its kind. Literally every single part of Powerhouse is fun to fight on. The tunnel chokes combined with the high ground assaults lead to some of the most exhilarating team fights in the entire game. This carries over to the final point, which is one of the biggest ass clenchers there is. Both teams kamikazeing themselves onto the point while weaving around the turbines for cover gives those last stand holds a really nice sense of heft to them. Sadly, Powerhouse is also well known for being the most stalematey map in the game, so that feeling of satisfaction is often unfulfilled by both parties. It's a shame, really. 44. Shark Bay, the highest ranked 2020's King of the Hill map and one of the most beloved additions in recent memory. Everything about Shark Bay plays into its premise in spectacular fashion. The high ground plank walk makes for a fun ambush position to both use and guard, and the shark bite environmental kills really help wrap a bow on the concept. Lots of pyro pushing to be had here. The interior fights are well balanced, snipers don't dominate despite how open the point is, just really well designed all around. 43. Banana Bay. 2 bays in a row, would you look at that. This one's one of the most chaotic and scattershot clusterfucks in the entire game, with so many flanks, tunnels, and extra pathways that all create this tangled web of player exchanges, which is somewhat of an acquired taste, but for me, it's a shitload of fun. Banana Bay is a lot like Atom Smash, where you really need a full 24-man server to appreciate how shit-flingingly fucked things can get. Grasping onto the payload cart for dear life, fighting off multiple spawn waves while waiting for the train is one of the most high-octane parts of any TF2 map. 42. Foundry. One of the more open 5CP experiences out there, but that doesn't make it bad, especially with how much cover and high ground they give to the areas surrounding it. The shack fights between the points make for some tense CQC moments, and the massive cauldron fire makes for a cool backdrop and thematic finish. Doesn't hurt that it's one of the most achievement-dense maps in the game either. Completionists spend a lot of time here. 41. Applejack. The most popular modern-day CTF map by a fucking mile. A cozy aesthetic with a midpoint that feels straight out of King of the Hill, with virtually every part of the map being enjoyable to push into. One of the very few capture the flag maps that people actually play the objective on instead of jerking off doing nothing the entire game. If you're someone who joined in the 2020s era and actually like capturing the flag, Applejack is usually a top contender. 40. Mercenary Park. My personal favorite map in the game. From the early stage catwalks to the fights for the high ground balcony midway through to the split up team fights and sporadic vent encounters in the final showdown, everything about Mercenary Park is a complete home run. The sense of progression from all the way outside the building to slowly crawling your way into the facility is one of the best of any map in the game. Honestly, I have zero clue why this one isn't any higher. It's about as good as a TF2 map can get for me. 39. Berghausen. Anyways, Burger House was the solution to Valve's decade-long medieval content drought, and I'd say it was largely a success. Instead of splitting up both teams among multiple points, this one's a multi-stage map with 1 point each. This creates a lot more of a condensed melee clash where the hit reg is janky as fuck and everyone's eating each other's melee hits, which is kind of an acquired taste within medieval mode's already acquired taste, but it's a fun novelty every once in a while. 38. Badlands, King of the Hill. One of the most non-problematic, solid maps to ever be put in the game, which is surprising given it was never designed to be a solely King of the Hill map to begin with. The close-by interiors for each team allow for setup positions that keep the mid-fights rolling, and taking the high ground on the top of the crates is where scouts and soldiers thrive. It doesn't do anything overly exceptional, but a long-standing map with consistently fun matches for every class in the game is something that's bound to do pretty well. 37. Phoenix. To me, this one's always been the map personification of that fiery horse meme. Phoenix has a lot of playstyle variety, so many enjoyable pathways to wrap around the enemy team with, and a lot of opportunities for extremely fun back and forth, right up until the final point, which then becomes a 5-mile dash between Headshot Valley and Rocket Jump Cornhole. This elevator ride on last is fucking brutal, and it wouldn't shock me if it was the only thing keeping it from being any higher for most casual players. Outside of that, it's pretty good. 36. Granary. The silver medal for the highest ranked launch map, Granary still holds up very well in the eyes of many. The shipping container mid-fights are some of the most iconic in the game. Movement-heavy classes love this spot especially. The field crawl as you scrap forward inch by inch to the last point is also one of the most satisfying areas in the game, just as long as you have a sentry up to prevent scouts from rushing it immediately after capping second. The pipe up top makes for a lot of fun ambushes and helps split attention between more areas of the map, so even this area is pretty well balanced. It's a bit choky in some areas, you know, a product of 2007 TF2, but that doesn't make it not fun. 35, Well, 5CP. Slightly edging out Granary for the most beloved launch map, Well's 5CP variant has one of the best feelings of progression of any TF2 map. It actually mirrors Granary in quite a few ways, where the mid-fights are chaotic and offer a ton of height variety. Infiltrating the bunker can feel a bit claustrophobic, but there are flanks that funnel you into high ground positions to break that up a bit, and the final fight showdowns have a great feeling of scale to them. For me, I'd put them both a lot higher. In my eyes, they're everything that a 5CP map should be. 34, Coldfront. Still not off the control point cluster, Coldfront's another one that's pretty good. What separates this one from the others is, while the scale of the map feels a lot less grand, the alternate pathways are more condensed, which makes player skirmishes happen a bit more consistently. Large team stacks are still a constant, but there's enough wiggle room for classes to run around and do their own thing. Really solid map that I struggle to find anything to complain about with. 33, Skirmish. Back on the Saxton Hale train we go, and I gotta admit, I did not expect anyone to have strong feelings on this one. This may be a case of players rating alternative game modes on a curve, because in my head, it's very hard to justify how this one's above a lot of the 2000s classics. Regardless, it does have much more positional variety than the other VSH maps, and the nighttime atmosphere is always a plus, but almost in the top quartile? Don't hurt yourself now. 32, Altitude. The highest rated map to come out of 2021, Altitude was probably the most obvious map choice that could make its way into the base rotation once the Smithmas event wrapped up. The uphill climbs can be a bit brutal in a few areas, but there are a lot of easily accessible flanks that help flip that dynamic on its head. The last point being one of the more open ones with an encircling balcony for the attackers gives Blue a lot of different spots to push inwards with. It took a while for Altitude to grow on me personally, but it's easy to understand why it's the top attack defend map of the 2020s era. 31, Badlands 5CP. One of the OG control point maps, but to be honest, I've never really thought of Badlands as one of the greats. The highlights of the map are easily the spires, some of the most chaotic and bomb-happy points in the game's history. Even the treks up to the peak have an early game charm that's hard to ignore. The mid-fights are just kinda whatever, without a spawn or sentry nest acting as a backboard for team fights, and the last points are way too susceptible to backcapping, but those spires, can't get enough of them. 30, Distillery. The highest rated Saxton Hale map in the game, and like Skirmish, I'm very shocked to see it almost hit the 20s. It does look the best of the bunch, and has an extremely open environment well suited for a 1v30 boss battle, but this is one where I couldn't even pretend to come up with reasons for why it's this high up, even if I tried. Of all the alt game modes, Saxton Hale is the most popular by player count, and whenever I personally shoot for a game, this is where I hope to end up. But top 30? Someone explain that one for me. 29, Snakewater. Now here's one where the appeal's a bit more apparent. The balance of interior areas, exterior areas, high ground, and low ground makes it well suited for most classes in the game, though it being a 6's staple doesn't lose it any points. Basically every main area of the map has something going on to differentiate it from all the others. It's not one of my favorites, but I can see why people like it. 28, Five Gorge. Another 5CP map. They've all really meshed together around this area, haven't they? This mostly comes down to the appeal of 5CP being more intrinsic to the back and forth game state across multiple objectives, and less the intricate design makeup surrounding that game type. That's all I can point to anyways, because Five Gorge is genuinely the most middle of the road map in the game, and I have zero clue why it's this high up. I guess people like regular Gorge, so giving it the old duplicate and flip is enough for a high B tier? I don't know. Every time I queue into it, I just think about how much more fun I'd be having on regular Gorge. But who knows how relatable that feeling is. 27, Sunshine. The second highest rated 5CP map, and thank God, cause I need a break from them. Sunshine's at least got a lot more cover areas, movement options, and flanks that see a lot of regular play. It's another case of being a comp staple that works decently well in a casual free-for-all environment. I can't say I'm a big fan of the enclosed midpoints or pushing into last for that matter, but at least the final point does a fair bit to inhibit the spawn waves stalemating the game into oblivion. Not my thing at all, but I can see why people rank it so high. 26, Moss Rock. This one's always felt like more of a balanced take on the old school meat grinder theming, with every inside area providing a wealth of back and forth shit flinging. Large scale team fights are everywhere around the map, but there are enough strong pathways that allow for pick classes to actually play the game. The clashes for control over the final point are also some of the biggest ball clenchers in the game, with so many approach options for both the attacking and defending teams. Snipers can be a pain when the tunnel is getting locked down, but the good definitely outweighs the bad here. 25. Selbian. The second highest ranked map of the 2020s, the #1 player destruction map in the game, and the crown jewel of the 3 summer updates we've gotten thus far. Selbian's another one of those fuck around and kill shit maps, only this time the fruits of your fuckery get pasteurized into sardines and fed to a cute little blubber boy. You could argue it's a bit too tight in some areas and the open shore is sniper purgatory, but the theme for this one carries hard. Hopefully one day player destruction, and payload race for that matter, climb their way out of alt game mode so we can get matches of them more often. 24. Suijin. So apparently this one began life as an arena map, and goddamn if that ain't the most obvious lore in the world. Suijin's best known for the objective being another game of rocket skee-ball, while half the team is fucking around in the Fourside temple, testing how audacious a sniper main can really be. Honestly, this is another one I want an explanation for. Half the game is spent playing rooftop hopscotch and nothing else. Suijin's high tier status has always been anathema to me. 23. Thunder Mountain. A bit of a shake-up to the traditional payload meta because brute force pushes don't really do much on either 3 stages of the map. It definitely has the most variance among any multi-stage map in the game, with the first one being a more open, flank-heavy layout, the second being a massive tower with a stronger emphasis on team positioning, and the third stage requiring blue to hold down the upper corridors to make sure the rest of the team can safely push in. Kinda gives off a Moss Rock sort of vibe. All 3 have their fans, so there's something here for everybody. And it doesn't hurt that the lighting effects on the buildings are pure eye candy. One of the most beautiful maps in the game. 22. High Pass. Glad to see this one getting its flowers. It's about as close to a perfect TF2 map as you can possibly get. So many different pathways to push into the objective from, but they all weave together to create really cohesive teamfights at mid. No matter what route you take or how many teammates are by your side, you're always able to lay on the pressure from multiple angles. I could do a whole video on how much High Pass flies under the radar. It definitely deserves a mention in the conversation of TF2's objectively best maps. 21. Steel. Steel might have one of the steepest learning curves in the game for fresh out of 2-4 gibbous goobers, but once you're able to process the multi-point structure, you're in for a very good time. It's surprisingly well balanced given its more condensed size. Every class is able to find enjoyment in some capacity here. The 4-point rotation gives a lot of encounter variety before going in for the final cap, should you even opt to do so in the first place. It isn't even a requirement. Noob unfriendly? Yes. Good map? Also yes. 20. Landfall. This one's a product of the more open, less fortified CTF design territory that's seen a rise in appeal over the past decade or so. The middle area is a bit of a jumbled mess of pathways, but despite this, it is viewed as the highlight of the map for most people. And it leading to 3 separate avenues of approaching the base ends up lessening those sentry stalemates a lot more than the others. Clearing a path to the intel here has always felt a lot more feasible than the other CTF maps, so it doesn't surprise me to see this one rank so high. 19. Snowy Coast. Kicking off the A tier just barely past the top 20, Snowy Coast has always been one of the more consistent payload maps in the game. There are a fuckload of long straightaways and some brutal sniper positionings, but because of the sheer amount of accessible flank routes, blue is usually able to cave inwards on red quite handily. Sentry spam on last is also much less effective here, given how open the terrain is, combined with multiple pathways to push inwards. It's not up there with the payload goats, but it's pretty damn good. 18. Lakeside. This map has so many enjoyable areas to duke it out on. The war for holding down the water temple and laying claim to that full health pack being the most fun for me. Playing guard dog has never felt this rewarding. Despite how open the map appears, the sniper battlements are surprisingly easy to neutralize, and some of the most vital areas of the map are closed off from the fray entirely. Every class feels fun to play here, which isn't something that can be said for most other maps that consist of wide open plains as a core design pillar. 17. Harvest. Harvest. Speaking of wide open plains as a core design pillar, Harvest might be the game's shining example of doing it right. It's the most played King of the Hill map for a reason. I used to be a Harvest hater myself. For years I viewed it as sniper hell and not much else. But with how important the farmhouses are to hold and how insulated the point is, the more sniper bait classes can still excel if you play to the class's strengths. If sniper wasn't as oppressive here, I'd bet on this one being top 10, but sadly life isn't a Shunic video. 16. Hightower. Home of all troll remains and sadistic mini-century Engies looking for prey, Hightower's another one of TF2's patented fuck around and do nothing maps that spawn up whenever players collectively decide that playing the objective isn't a worthwhile selling point. The final cart push stagnates the game for so long that players have opted to ignore it entirely and make their own kill playground for funsies. The emergent culture of Hightower is why it's so high up. If you want to goof around for an hour until someone caps purely for the sake of completing a contract, this is where you go. 15. Mountain Lab. This one has everything from a fantastic sense of progression to unique terrain variety that no other map has come close to replicating, to one of the most dynamic and strongest usages of verticality within the game. The Engie forts are fun to take on from this angle especially. Looks beautiful, plays great. If it weren't for the lack of forward moving spawn and a few sightlines midway through, it'd likely go down as TF2's greatest attack defend map. Silver medal's still good though. 14. Konkang. One of those maps where every single part of the map is enjoyable to fight on. The lower level acts as a perfect funnel between the objective and the enemy team's spawn, the mainland is relatively open but with lots of high ground and cover to play around with, and the nighttime vibe is cozy as always. If it weren't for the street signs constantly bonking jumper classes in the forehead, I'd personally have nothing to complain about on this one. 13. Double Cross. The highest rank capture the flag map, and while a bit surprising, I guess I can see why that is. The bridge makes for a lot of good back and forth team fights, it's one of the best maps in the game on the visual front, and gameplay often oscillates between team-stacked orgies sweating their way to the intel room, to little Timmy learning how to rocket jump for the first time and dropping into the bottomless pit. You get a lot of player variety here. Snipers kinda ruin the map in my view. Feels like the mid-fights are constantly getting cut short just to get out of dodge, but I guess I'm in the minority there. 12. Gorge. The highest ranked attack defend map in the game, Gorge has always been a fan favorite. The beginning stage is really open and has multiple different options to flank around the enemy team, while the final point is a giant pit with multiple nearby flanks to encircle the enemy. The duo-layered interior makes for a lot of fun ambushes, and everyone jumping in the pit as a last resort to stop the cap will never get old to me. You do need a DPS class harassing the backlines to prevent the last choke from getting dominated by one sniper, but provided you have even one competent player, that's usually a guarantee. Gorge is very consistently fun. 11. Process. The third gold medalist of their respective game modes in a row, Process is the king of 5CP maps and takes that crown by a significant margin. It's the natural habitat of every TF2 sweatlord and has a much beloved fanbase among veterans for this reason. Even then, in full casual 12v12 lobbies, it works pretty well. The inside buildings act as connective tissue between the mid area and the final point, which gives classes that struggle in the more open areas a much needed play space. This is the standard bearer that a lot of modern 5CP maps have attempted to emulate, but none of them have been able to dethrone it quite yet. And at long last, we've finally hit the top 10. If you're an avid TF2 fan, you might already know them all by process of elimination alone. You'll begin to notice one game mode in particular has a large amount of representation, which shouldn't come as much of a surprise. Number 10. Sawmill, King of the Hill. This one's entirely down to having arguably the most entertaining midpoint of any King of the Hill map out there. The saw blades make the team fights a lot more interesting, punishing reckless movement, but also providing cover in desperate situations. There's a surprising amount of ways to wrap around back to the objective, and it does its job of being a true King of the Hill map quite well. Most of Sawmill is kinda below par and isn't used all that much. It's a bit of a one-trick pony in that regard, but that one trick is very enjoyable. Number 9. Barn Blitz. Barn Blitz is extremely weird in that whenever you try to describe it to somebody, it sounds absolutely miserable. You mean I'm forced to trudge through 3 different barns full of wrangled sentries, high ground perches, and sniper sight lines that are smack dab in the middle of each entrance? It sounds like a pain in the ass, but for some reason, Barn Blitz just kinda works. The constant feeling of, what if this Uber push finally does it, is what keeps me playing it year round. It kinda has that Dust Bowl feeling where you're often forced to eat shit for 8 minutes before finally getting some ice cream on minute 9. Though, unlike Dust Bowl, Barn Blitz has much looser pathways, better flanks, and and a more open terrain makeup, so the gameplay tends to be a lot less power class heavy. Happy to see this one rank so high. Number 8, Viaduct. They really did knock this one out of the park so early on. Almost 17 years later, and nothing's been able to knock Viaduct off its podium. The layout is extremely simple, just 3 separate pathways that funnel into 4 different routes of approaching the point. Yet, the map is compact enough to where player fights never stop rolling. Not one pixel on Viaduct feels wasted. Every single area sees regular action, no matter the game state. Combine that with how it's perfectly scaled to accommodate every single class in the game, and it's easy to see why this one takes the crown of the best King of the Hill map, even with 24 competitors trying to rip away that title. Number 7, Borneo. 2015 saw over a dozen new maps enter the fray, and Borneo was rated head and shoulders above the rest. This all comes down to how tense the fights for the warehouses are. Maintaining control over them is pivotal to either locking down a fort or breaking through one. It's got a solid combination of more open and more closed off areas, to where class interactions feel very balanced. Everything after the second push especially just evolves into both teams constantly feeding into each other. And for as much shit as payload maps get for the final points, Borneo's at least has an easy access point to push into spawn from. An Uber demo around the corner is much more worthwhile here than on most other maps. It's a pretty good time. Number 6, DeGroot Keep. Wait, what the fuck? DeGroot Keep at number 6. If you guys say so. I'll be honest, I was not expecting even A tier for this one, let alone being the single highest ranked non-payload map in the game. I guess it does make sense. DeGroot Keep has always been a fun novelty enjoyed by the vast majority of players, and it was the first non-traditional game mode to ever be introduced, but I don't know about this one, guys. Forcing every class, barring 2, onto nothing but melee weapons does create a whole new meta where typically dogshit weapons are given some functional utility, and Demo Knight being top dog isn't something you'll find anywhere else. That being said, I think this is another case of you guys grading novel game types on a curve. Top 6 for a sideshow that barely anybody plays is, a bit much, I think. Number 5, Swiftwater. Okay, now this one makes a little bit more sense. Swiftwater is one of the more open payload maps, with less of an emphasis on projectile bukkakeing the cart. With good verticality and strong flanks to take advantage of on virtually every point, the game never feels like it's over until it's truly over. One big push through any of them is enough to divert enough eyes for a sneaky objective cap. It does have the problem of a couple of really bad sightlines, as is the problem for most maps that tear themselves open to give more room to breathe, but this one's unique enough to justify its mainstay status. Meet Your Match might have been a travesty, but at least we got a good map out of it. Number 4, Frontier. This is where Valve started testing the limits of what the payload game mode could really become. Lil Choo Choo, being this big-ass platform cart, ends up obstructing a lot of long-range spam and sightline issues that are often the death knell for a lot of linear maps of this scale. This naturally conditions a defending team to position themselves closer to the objective to prevent the cart from blocking oncoming fire. It also sparks a lot of back and forth brawls for the flanks, which are some of the most effective of any payload map in the game. No 2 games of Frontier feel identical, which is why it's one of my personal favorites. If it weren't for the wrangled sentry sniper combos on last, it'd have a solid case for number 1 in my eyes, but I'm very glad to see it be so high up. Number 3, Pier. My personal favorite payload map and the highest ranked map of the 2020s era by a fucking mile. Hard to believe this one was added in the same update as Whatville. I love everything about this map, from the cozy nighttime aesthetic to how well balanced it is for every class to how many low ground flanks there are, which are often paired with effective high ground positionings. Even both flank routes on last position you so close to the enemy team's spawn that it always feels like you're one good Uber away from locking down the game. Pure is what can happen when you decide not to flood the zone with shit, and decide that the answer to a multi-year long content drought is one map and one map only. Everyone who wanted a novelty fix in the early 2020s came here, because where the fuck else would you go? This caused it to mesh into almost everybody's permanent map rotation, because there wasn't an overabundance of new maps all vying for your attention, and what we got out of it was the highest ranked map to come out in the past 15 years. Just not quite enough to outdo the classics. Number 2, Badwater. If there was a meteor headed towards Earth and you only had the chance to play one last round of TF2, Badwater is where where a heavy portion of the player base would go. This is TF2 distilled down to its purest essence, and besides maybe Two Fort, is the single most iconic map in the entire game. It's a bit dated in some areas, bad sightlines, tight chokes. It's a little in need of that 2010s polish, but there's a reason why Badwater is the hallmark of old school TF2 maps and a massive part of the new player experience even to this day. You could argue it's a bit formulaic. Most sniper spots, sentry positionings, and what flanks to guard have all long since been figured out, but any map that's had 18 years of longevity will inevitably have those class dynamics beaten into the map's DNA. That consistency is what gives the map widespread appeal. You know exactly what you're getting with Badwater, and what you're getting is pretty damn good. There's just one more map that's slightly more beloved. Number 1, Upward. The highest ranked map in all of TF2, and let me tell you, it was not a close call. The point difference between Upward and Swiftwater is the same point difference between Swiftwater and Odyssey, all the way down at 45. If Badwater is TF2 distilled into a single map, Upward takes that distillation process and purifies it to an even greater degree, with more unique terrain layouts, a better balance of open and closed off areas, similarly fun flanking potential, and of course those cliffside pyro pushes making their way into every clip dump under the sun. Every point feels satisfying to hold while being even more satisfying to push into. And yes, the final choke can be kinda brutal, but that brutality is part of the fun. You need some rain to get to the rainbow. Almost half of the survey respondents gave Upward a perfect 10 out of 10. And sure, a lot of it might be the nostalgia talking, but there's a reason why even today, it's one of the most played maps in the game. Even 16 years later, it still holds up phenomenally well. It isn't my personal number 1, and it might not be yours either, but it is in the good graces of almost everybody, and that's why it's taken home the trophy. So there we go. That's all 126 maps in TF2 ranked from the worst to the best. Not by me, but by you. If you took the time to fill out the survey, just know I appreciate it very much. I'll have some follow-up takes that'll eventually make themselves known on this channel, because goddamn, this was quite the eye-opener. Anyways, I appreciate you all for watching the video, but for now, that's all I got. See ya.